Welcome back to the second segment of our Buffalo Niagara focus as part of MedTech's Empire State Biomed Focus 22 series. For those of you who were with us during the first hour, you heard some really terrific opportunities in the Buffalo Niagara region generally. We wanted to spend this hour talking with some leaders of particular life science resources and assets, folks whose organizations are helping to propel the biomed industry across upstate New York, but particularly located here in Western New York. So I'm thrilled to be joined today by this terrific group. They include Norma Nowak, who is the executive director of the New York State Center of Excellence in Bioinformatics and Life Sciences at the University of Buffalo. Stephen Schwaitzberg, who directs the UB Rise program at the University of Buffalo and is chairman of the Department of Surgery at the at Buffalo School of Medicine and Biomedical Sciences. Ed Snell, who is president and chief executive officer at the Hauptman-Woodward Medical Research Institute. And Ron Newbold, the chief business officer at the Empire Discovery Institute, a collaborative program of the University of Rochester, the University of Buffalo, and Roswell Park Cancer Institute. Thank you, one and all, for being with us today. Norma, let me start the discussion with you. I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about the Center of Excellence in Bioinformatics and where it fits into the larger life sciences ecosphere in the Buffalo Niagara region.
Sure. So I am probably the last person standing from when the Centers of Excellence were actually created back in the early 2000s. And at that time, we had, Buffalo General Hospital, there was Roswell Park on the campus, and UB had not yet established its footprint in downtown Buffalo. With the Center of Excellence designation in the early 2000s, that started the shift of the university into the city. And really that Center of Excellence building, which sits on the corner of Ellicott and Virginia, was the first foothold downtown for the university and really was a huge step forward in establishing life sciences. And if you think about the year that's around when all of this was happening, 2001 was when the draft of the first human genome was published. And that first human genome actually came from an individual from Western New York. And I was at both Roswell Park and the University of Buffalo at the time. So again, showing that sense of collaboration for the work that was done to produce that very first human genome. Thus the name of the center, the Center of Excellence in Bioinformatics and Life Sciences. The name of the center really came out of, again, the fact that data is so important. And I think as part of that human genome program, we realized that you could sequence a genome, but you had to be able to understand the data within that genome to really make an impact on how it would enable healthcare, how it would basically discover, again, specific mutations in genes that could then be targeted for cancer and other disorders. And really, it was the game changer, I think, for establishing downtown Buffalo as a life sciences center here in this end of the state. And I think really it's one of the strongest ones in the state.
And Stephen, let me turn to you as a colleague at the University of Buffalo of Norma. Tell us a bit about your work and the work of the program called UB Rise.
Yes, good morning. Well, when I came here 7 years ago, I saw tremendous opportunity. Buffalo has clearly been on the upswing. I came from Boston, where there's an obviously very vibrant MedTech community, and wanted to bring some of those attributes to Buffalo. With the building of a brand new, medical school campus downtown, adding the actual building on Main Street, we have the facilities where we can do the same types of things that we do for teaching surgical skills are the same types of facilities, people, and attributes that are used to develop medical technology devices. They need operating room environments, endoscopy environments, different types of test fixtures. We actually can really do it all. And through a gracious donation, we were able to establish the Chota Family Advanced Procedure Unit within UB-RISE. And it was actually one of my former assistants who named UB-RISE, which stands for Research, Innovation, Simulation, Structure, Education, and Engineering, sort of saying we do it all, from animate to inanimate simulation and testing. And we've been blessed to do some really very exciting cutting edge projects there.
Thank you. And Ed Snell, while we're in the neighborhood, I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about your work at Hauptman-Woodward, where Hauptman-Woodward kind of fits into the larger picture, and perhaps most particularly some of your work in the device space.
Well, the Hauptman-Woodward Medical Research Institute was founded in 1956. It's an independent, not-for-profit institute under the vision of George Kepf and the generosity of Helen Woodward Revis, whose father owned the recipe to Jell-O. So for over 60 years, we've been at the forefront of a science called structural biology, and the importance of which has now been made very understandable by the public. When you look at pictures of the virus that causes COVID-19, that's actually what we do. And although those pictures have got nice colors in that, we actually study the viruses at a scale that is smaller than color itself. We house the National Crystallization Center, supported by NIH as a national facility. We run a facility for 8 major pharmaceutical companies: AbbVie, Bristol Myers Squibb, Evotec, Janssen, Merck, Novartis, Pfizer, and Relay Therapeutics, that's just west of Chicago, and have a small staff there. And the mission of the Institute is improving health and well-being of humanity through structural biology. We like to say innovation, discovery, and education. We're very, very far from the patient, but very, very close to very fundamental research that's carried out.
And Ron Newbold, Empire Discovery Institute, really kind of a new area in the life sciences for upstate New York, a part of the country that perhaps in the life sciences had been more closely identified in the device space. Empire Discovery Institute is really pioneering some work in the pharmaceutical space. And I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about the structure of the program, its purposes, where you folks are headed.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Wynn. Empire Discovery Institute was created. We kicked off around 2019 through a seed investment from Empire State Development. So the incentive and motivation is to strengthen and build the biotech ecosystem in Western New York. It's really kind of central to the discussion today. We're working, as you mentioned, with University of Rochester, University of Buffalo, and Roswell Park Comprehensive Cancer Center to identify novel early stage academic research programs that have commercialization potential, the potential to be picked up by the pharmaceutical and biotech industries, to be advanced as in identifying potential therapeutics that could benefit patients clinically. So EDI, as we refer to the Empire Discovery Institute, is making investments in those programs. We have a process through which we identify promising programs from faculty at each of those 3 institutions, and we're working collaboratively with them, with a scientific advisory board and experts that have spent their careers in the pharmaceutical industry doing exactly that, developing drugs, advancing them through preclinical studies. And then ultimately my role as Chief Business Officer is to engage in conversations with pharmaceutical partners to license those projects, take them into their pipelines, and to continue to iterate that process. Our hope is that commercialization activities will help feed the input financially as well as intellectually to continue to build on this innovation presence in Western New York. And so that's really our objective.
And I know you've recently announced a number of collaborations or opportunities as you rolled that out. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about those.
Sure, yeah. So beyond the investment from New York State, we announced a partnership with Deerfield Management about a little over a year ago, early last year. And so they're looking at programs. They've been very active in the New York City area, but they also have partnerships across the country with a range of universities and medical centers through which they also are interested in identifying opportunities. They're a venture capital firm, but they're also, looking to identify earlier stage projects that many VCs will invest in. And so they're an avenue potentially for us to invest and advance those programs. They have their own operational capabilities. So in the event that they are interested in something in any of the therapeutic areas, and we really cover the waterfront from a disease perspective, Deerfield could pick up and support programs like that. Just more recently than that, we also announced a partnership with Novo Nordisk, who built a bioinnovation hub in Cambridge, Mass. So they've established a footprint for early stage drug discovery in the United States, and they identified EDI as an opportunity for them to source the same sorts of opportunities. They're interested in cardiometabolic diseases, in rare blood disorders, and opportunities around both heart disease, diabetes, and sort of their strengths in kidney disorders. And so they're also an active collaboration of ours. We have a joint steering committee between EDI and Novo Nordisk working with their bioinnovation hub, and hope that those both, and there'll be others, partnerships that we anticipate that will provide an avenue for us to advance some of these potential projects from the universities.
So, Norma, let me turn to you again. One of the kind of through points I've been hearing in this discussion has been the work that each of your organization is doing in really moving the process along, accelerating the process from research to product development to commercialization. You yourself have your own experiences as an entrepreneur in this space, and really now are leading a significant program that is helping to accelerate that process. Talk to me, if you can, about how we make that happen. What are the connectors that are allowing the growth of the life sciences in the Buffalo Niagara region?
So if you go back and think about the original mission for the Center of Excellence, it was to really be that bridge between academia and industry. And the thought at that point in time, back in the early 2000s, was that we really needed a way to take that richness of our science and provide a means to commercialize it. That really wasn't what scientists were doing at the time, right? So the Center of Excellence has built into it both funding through the center's funding, which is about $1 million a year, and we cut a piece of that for projects which are very early stage. We then also run the Center for Advanced Technology program, which is another state-funded grant matching program, and that will actually provide funds. Usually, we can go as high as $100,000 to $150,000 for a company. The company has to match those funds. So again, it has to be more than just a one-man show. So you have to have a New York State employee. You have to be, again, in the state of New York. But that program has been really successful in helping companies like Garwood Medical. We funded several projects for Garwood and helped, again, them take their R&D and push it down this commercialization path. And if you're not familiar with Garwood Medical, they essentially have a device which allows electrical current to be used to prevent infections at the site of joint replacements. It can also be used for things like dental implants, and when you also have people with amputations, so osseointegrative devices for veterans or young cancer patients. So they have had several of these CAT grants, but we also provide space at the Center of Excellence where they can take advantage of all of the equipment that has been brought into the facility to support their science without the company itself having to make those capital investments. The other assets that the center offers are, we have a high-performance computing center, the Center for Computational Research, which Garwood has leveraged. We also have 2 core facilities, the proteomics core, which is a mass spec-based facility, which is protein analysis, as well as the genomics and bioinformatics core, which again is a full range. Next generation sequencing and other genomic technologies are offered with, again, complete. It's a facility where you walk in the door, you provide your sample, and we do all of the work, and we provide the analysis at the same time. So it's all integrated within the Center of Excellence. With Steve's help, we have also established a biorepository for the University of Buffalo, which we feel is critical to really driving translational sciences and, again, enabling life science companies when it comes to the development of both diagnostics and therapeutics. That's now actually located in the Center of Excellence. It's located in the Center for Translational Research, which is about 2 blocks north of where I am at the Center of Excellence at the CTRC. And that is a hybrid building between Kaleida Health and the University of Buffalo. And that, again, is a state-of-the-art enterprise-wide biobank, which is fully automated and has a LIMS system which collects information on the samples, as well as allows us to then integrate information around those patient samples. And Steve's been a huge supporter of that facility, and we very much appreciate that. So if you look at it, the centers, both the CAT as well as the Center of Excellence, provide non-dilutive funding, which for companies is a wonderful source of money. And we encourage them to not just live off of SBIRs, but to, again, then seek out management teams, which can really drive commercialization. I started a company. I knew then that I was not the right person to be the CEO of that company, and found someone who came out of the Thermo Fisher, well, it would have been at the time, Life Tech, out of industry to help me get the company off the ground and run it for a number of years. So it's a matter of really helping people understand what their strengths are. And most of our scientists, their strengths are in the lab. If we can support them, and in some ways like EDI, where you bring that team in who evaluate the science and then figure out that path to commercialization. And we provide both support for young entrepreneurs as well as working with established companies like Thermo Fisher Scientific.
And while we're talking about collaboration, and I want to pick up on something that I caught my ear, Stephen, when you were talking, and that is, of course, you came to Buffalo from the Boston area. Certainly for folks in the life sciences, in many ways, Boston, Cambridge is Mecca in our world, and many folks wouldn't necessarily think of Buffalo as a center of innovation or growth in the life sciences. And I'm wondering if you can also talk a little bit about what would bring somebody from Boston to Buffalo. What are the can you compare a bit the two regions and talk about your experience?
So I was in Boston for a long time before it was Mecca, and the key was to build critical mass. And like many, interesting cities from around the country, they're often victims of their own success. Real estate is expensive. Doing studies is expensive. Traffic is horrible. Hard to get in and out. And as we attempt to build our own critical mass, we have several things going for us right now. Buffalo is easy. I have companies that I've literally worked with whose principals live in downtown Boston, but their company is 20 miles south of the city, which could really mean about an hour and a half to 2-hour drive in the morning. And they tell me it's easier to get on a plane, come to Buffalo, be in the medical center in 15 minutes, stay at the hotel if they need to, and do their studies and go home. And some of them commute on a daily basis when we're doing studies with them. We've got a lot going for us, and we need to build that critical mass because that's what generates geometrically expanding activity.
And let me say, and those folks in our audience who have heard me in the past, I often talk about our vision of particularly Interstate 90 as the super corridor, right? If you look at growth in the life sciences, not only has there been tremendous growth in the Buffalo region, but as well in Toronto, in Pittsburgh, in Cleveland. And if you pull out your map, right, I love to say you can't get from Boston to Cleveland in any way other than down the Route 90 corridor. and I'm intrigued to listen to you talk about some of the kind of built-in advantages to being in a place like Buffalo. I wonder too if you could talk a bit about proximity to Canada, to the Canadian market. What does that mean for you and the work that you're doing?
Sure, it's huge actually. We've done a number of projects with people on the Niagara Peninsula, London, Hamilton, Toronto. Many of these companies either need to set up a US subsidiary in order to be eligible for some of the funds that they need, or as we all know here in Buffalo, how the airplanes work. If they want to travel domestically in the US, it's a lot simpler for them to drive to our airport, the same way we all go up to Toronto when we want to fly to Europe and Asia. And so for them, they consider it amazingly convenient. The pandemic has obviously put a crimp in everything, but as that sort of starts to slow down and we get past that, we've already had inquiries from groups eager to come to the U.S., meet key opinion leaders that we can assemble here from around the country. As you know, we're a direct flight from about a third of the U.S. population, so it's really easy for us not only to put our own expertise on site, but to be a focus, one of the key focus points in the United States that can be used to build this innovation network.
And Eddie, I think I discerned in your voice something that was not a Western New York accent. I'm wondering if you'd talk a little bit about what brought you to Buffalo. What was the driver that attracted you here?
That's interesting because I came to Buffalo to give a talk about some research I was doing, and that talk turned into an interview. And I basically said, "You've got to sell this to my wife," and they did. I came back with my wife. I got virtually left in an office, and they treated her so well and introduced her to so many people in Buffalo that she was sold on the idea. And we've been here since about 2005 and love the place.
Explain to us where a kind of niche institute like Hauptman-Woodward fits into the larger life sciences ecosphere in the region.
Well, we basically do a science called structural biology, and the Hauptman name comes from Herb Hauptman, who won the Nobel Prize in chemistry for a technique that allowed us to actually visualize drugs and the things they bind to in 3 dimensions, so we can greatly speed up or accelerate the time it takes to develop a new drug once we've got a target. We have focused on that kind of area of research. We're very famous for our crystallization work, and we've worked with about 2,000 laboratories worldwide on that. That's academic laboratories. We've also worked with industry as well. And more recently, we've just invested about $8 million in a new technology called cryo-electron microscopy, which is the first of these systems in Western New York that can visualize that same scale, so that we can see the targets of drugs and the drugs that bind to them without the need for crystals, which is a very long process in itself. So we're always pushing the technology. That's how we get a lot of our industry collaborations, our academic collaborations, because as we develop new tools, we make them available to people. And we've really put our foot in both the academic world and the industrial world, so that we can understand the needs of both, and we can understand the development of both and accelerate both of those areas.
Similarly, I'm curious to hear, and Ron, maybe I'll start with you, but I'd love to hear from everybody. Let's talk a little bit about the economy of upstate New York, the economy of the life sciences, not only in the region but across the nation. And then let me preface it by talking a little bit, and we'll move slightly. Ron, I know you're in the Rochester area, and so while we're not focused on that region today, I often look at as somebody who has lived his entire life in upstate New York, we often looked at the Rochester region and said, Rochester, Rochester is bulletproof, right? When more kind of manufacturing heavy cities like Buffalo and Syracuse were first hitting some of those deindustrialization declines, we thought, well, we never have to worry about Rochester, right? Rochester has Eastman Kodak. We will always need film. Rochester has Xerox. We will always need paper copies. Rochester has Bausch and Lomb. We will always need ground glass lenses, right? And then the digital revolution came along, and it turns out we don't need film and copies and ground glass lenses in the way that we did before. And at the same time, there was a fundamental shift in interaction between government and private industry to bring to market research that was coming out of academic institutions. In some ways, I think the Empire Discovery Institute, and frankly, the work that you're all doing, fits into some of that space. Tell me from your perspective how you see these types of investments having a transformative effect on the economy of the region.
Yeah, it's a great question, Wynn, and I think, yeah, clearly no economy is immune to changes due to technology. Rochester has transformed quite a bit, just as Buffalo has. There's been tremendous investment in Buffalo over the past probably 10 years, and I think I see that only continuing. I think many of our regions, particularly outside of New York City sort of sphere of influence, really recognize that there's amazing university brain power up here, that a lot of these innovations, right, Rochester's benefiting from growth in optics applied to health and life sciences. And I think Buffalo's in the same situation. We do see, and with the state's help, I think Empire State has been incredibly supportive and forward thinking about these investments, right? Whether it started with the investment in Buffalo 10 and more years ago, it continues to this day supporting our industry. I think we recognize there's a lot of opportunity that can be leveraged from historic sort of manufacturing capabilities. You all have pointed out sort of the economic benefits, right? It's much less expensive to live, to commute, to work up in this region. It's not that far from areas where it is a little more complex and there's a higher density of activities. But I think there's a lot of us that either grew up or are familiar with the space or recognize the economic and work-life benefits that feel that this is a great place to continue to build. So our growth opportunities, I think, are much more significant. And the interest that the state has provided to, in my situation for Empire Discovery Institute, but I think for all of these institutions and universities, really gives us a collaborative opportunity to work together in a way that you don't see in some other regions. I lived and worked for many years in the pharma industry in New Jersey and in New York City. And while there's that density, and you see this at universities as well in Boston and elsewhere, there's not a lot of communication. You might be many hundreds of miles away and have a closer relationship than you might in some of those institutions, because there's also an element of competition. I think here in the Western New York region, there's an opportunity for us to work really well together. And because, the state said, well, EDI is going to be formed to collaborate with Buffalo, with Roswell Park, and with the University of Rochester, it's working really well. And so we're introducing faculty to each other, and we're having discussions about, oh, my technology could help you advance your particular technology. Hauptman-Woodward, we benefit from the strengths of not only sort of crystallization capabilities. We constantly are working with groups in the Buffalo region around virtual screening of small molecules, for example, to lead development with some of the CROs in the region. So I think we can leverage that sort of the change in the economic environment and to focus in our particular industries in a way that the trick is attracting more of us to the region, right? People to either come home or to recognize that this is a really great place to live. It's not that far from Boston, New York City, or anywhere else where people may be coming from, even the West Coast, to recognize that this is a really nice opportunity that I think everyone has really surfaced.
You make me think of I think another terrific example of that, not in the Buffalo region, but there are certainly examples across New York State. You take a look at Regeneron, certainly a company that has captured the attention of the life sciences community over the last few years. And Regeneron's headquarters and really incredible facility in the genomic space is located in Tarrytown, really kind of in the metropolitan New York region. And yet they're doing all of their advanced manufacturing in Rensselaer across the Hudson from Albany, in part because the availability of a trained workforce, the affordability, the capacity in parts of upstate New York are just far greater. And what I'm a bit worried that this discussion will get out and that others will figure out the tricks that we've understood here in upstate New York. But you said something that I'd love to have the rest of you talk a little bit about, and that is that at EDI, and I happen to know that it's true at the other institutions that are represented on this call, you've figured out how to collaborate. You've figured out how to cooperate. What's the secret sauce? How did that happen? Was it because, as perhaps you suggested, Ron, the state came in and said, you're going to collaborate? Or is there something about this region, something about the environment here that has helped foster that? I'll open that question up to each of you, and anyone who wants to start would be terrific.
Okay, Wynn, I'll start.
All right, thanks, Norma.
So what I didn't mention early on was that when the Center of Excellence was actually designated, it was created as a collaborative unit that would work with Hauptman-Woodward and Roswell Park and the University of Buffalo. So it was bringing UB downtown and integrating it with the clinical partners, as well as one of the leading institutes, as Ed has mentioned, in structural biology. And while, again, we had great leaders, and those great leaders in those academic institutes actually worked with the business community in downtown Buffalo and in the region. And I think it was that combination of bringing the business talent right with the academic talent and realizing that, again, when we all work together, really great things happen. And I often use the Human Genome Project as an example. A lot of people during that time, as we were seeking that very first human genome, set aside their own personal, this is my little gene goals, and really focused on what was the bigger initiative. And I think that's really what started back in the early 2000s here in Buffalo. And it's continued until today. And EDI is a great example where you have these three institutions working together, again, to address all of these, different disease issues. Having been here and part of this, lived my whole life here in Buffalo, I remember Buffalo and downtown being pretty much a dead city. And people said, why are you staying here? And I thought, I'm going to stay here because I have family. I worked at the Roswell Park Cancer Center at the time. And I couldn't imagine going anyone else because that's where the road to the Human Genome Project started. And if I weren't here, my career would probably look much different. So I just think of it as, really those early thought leaders created an environment and really catalyzed the transformation that you see today. And when you go to downtown Buffalo, it's not a dead city. It's bustling. There are young people wanting to not just grow up here, they stay here, or they go to college, or they get a degree in medicine, maybe here, maybe someplace else, but they come back here. And there was a time when everybody just left. And now you're seeing the city again be repopulated, and it's so vibrant and it's so rewarding for me to just look at the entire campus. When you have Buffalo, you have a new freestanding children's hospital. You have the Clinical and Translational Research Center. You have your big health partner, Kaleida Health, and there's also the Catholic system. And I think when all of us work together is what's really going to drive the region going even to bigger heights. And then working with our partners across the state. And that is in part what the Centers of Excellence were, and the CATs were about, was really tying the state together through these state programs. And I think throughout all of this time, government's not going to be the complete solution, but they're a great partner. And we need to figure out how we can leverage those partnerships along with industry, because again, without industry, the talent that comes out of industry. And I think about Genzyme when they went to Boston and how many, I think they spun off more than 150 companies. And that was really, a huge compliment to Genzyme itself, because they trained people, and those people left and took a risk and started all of these biotech companies in Boston. And I can remember, talking to some of the other leaders throughout the course of the Center of Excellence life and being in this whole area and saying, wouldn't it be great if we could be, the next Boston and Genzyme? We've got to be able to do things like that. And really the Buffalo Billion during, when it was being rolled out, started planting the seeds for a lot of the things that you now see going on in life sciences. But it really did start with that original collaboration between the university, the Hauptman-Woodward Institute, and Roswell Park Cancer Institute. And again, I think it comes back down to when you work together, great things will happen for all of the people that work with you, in addition to being able to solve some really big problems. And I look at, where we are in health sciences today, and, we've gotten much better at treating cancer. But I think about all of the neurodegenerative disorders. We still have to make a real dent in that. And that's something that as we all reach that age of 85, we're all going to be thinking about that. So with the talent that I think, with all of these institutes that we have between Steve and Ed, and then, again, what Ron brings to the table, I think we're in a great position in upstate to do that. And I always think of Rochester as upstate with us. So, once you hit Syracuse, you're over there. But, this area of the state, I think, needed huge investments. And I really am very, appreciative of the work that Empire State Development and the funds that they've really brought to this region.
So, boy, Norma has really your next career, Norma, should be as an evangelist for those of us who come from upstate New York, just to remain in upstate New York, and at the same time, Stephen, Eddie, I look at the two of you who came to this community from elsewhere. I'd love to know your perspectives on collaboration, how you compare that to what you saw at your prior homes. We hear this all the time, and yet I gotta be honest with you, it can't be quite as easy as Norma makes it sound. What do you guys think allows the kind of collaboration that she's talked about to flourish in this region?
I think there's a will to succeed. And, I came from Boston, and I was telling people I used to commute an hour and a half to 2 hours every day. And people around here just go, why would you ever do that? And here, people are they have this sort of sense of Midwest values. They're ready to help you. When I arrived, everybody from the car dealership to the people I met saying, we are on the upswing. How can we help each other to take this to a new level?
Eddie, your thoughts?
Well, I think I'm going to echo something that Norma said, which is really important when she mentioned the word campus. And one of the things that's tremendously impressed me coming to Buffalo is an organization called the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus that actually acts as a backbone organization. It involves all the heads of all the institutions that you're talking to here and others locally and the local community. And the goal of it has been to make it easy for people to work here, to understand parking, to understand food, to understand opportunities for the local community and that. And now that's moving into economic development, because I think people have realized that $1 in Buffalo goes a lot further than $1 in Boston or $1 in the Bay Area. And that kind of working environment collaboration makes the goals that each of our institutions do, the science, the medical care, that makes it so much more easier, and it makes it very attractive to bring staff into the area. We've recently hired staff from New York City. We've hired staff from Cornell. Our business development director was born in the Valley area in California. She's joining us. And it's enabled us to attract a very diverse element into Buffalo because of that backbone support that shows people that this area really wants to grow. It really wants to accelerate.
And while we're talking about business development, Ron, as a business development director, talk to me, if you can, about the process of business development at EDI. You're new, you're a terrific collaboration, but you're new. How do you how do you connect with potential partners? What's the value proposition that EDI brings to the table?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, I think through a career in the biopharma industry, most everyone that's in and around EDI comes from that type of background. So we have a lot of existing network. Yes, it's a new organization. I think what we really offer to pharmaceutical companies is an opportunity to access not only innovative science, which can come from anywhere and is available at most any institution around the world. But what we offer that is unique is this development expertise of pharmaceutical executives and development people. We have really all the disciplines represented. So as a BD person, I can talk about we're like a virtual biotech company with development capabilities and funding that's been provided as a start from the state of New York. But we also have an obligation to raise matching funds, as Norma described. I mean, that's our whole mission, is wherever we can, and I'm not just non-dilutive grant funding, but partnership funding, could be venture investment. One of the objectives that the state has set out for us is not only to advance and commercialize discoveries from our partner institutions, but also to create companies, to create jobs, to think about longevity, and ideally to become self-sufficient. And so in the conversations with pharmaceutical companies, my job and Martin Graham, our CEO, collectively, our job is to sell pharma on our development expertise. And to use Novo Nordisk as an example, what they found very attractive to us as partners is that we can create a joint steering committee. We can select and debate the science together. Of course, everything is early, and everyone can wait a little longer until it's a little further de-risked. And that's often an investor's story, is to say, well, I really like this, but I want to wait just a bit longer. The way to convince them to partner with us is we acknowledge these are early stage programs, but that's the opportunity to jump in. We can help craft that scientific program and development expertise together. And then over time, their objective is to internalize those programs. But we can co-invest both intellectually and financially into those programs, and to then consider spinning companies out. It may be the situation where a technology is ripe. It might be a platform technology that could apply to a range of therapeutic potential applications. And so whether with Novo or with other investors, creating startup companies in this region is also the path that we want to pursue, because it will sort of multiply exponentially the opportunities and the reach that EDI might have, that our founding institutions may have, and to strengthen the region overall.
So take a little bit of a look, Ron, in your crystal ball. 3 years into EDI, you've made some terrific advancements. Where do you see EDI 5 years from today?
Well, yeah, there's a lot. There's very large error bars around that, right? Because whether depending on the economy, depending on how the science develops, I think we want to create as many opportunities for that success as possible. The state has set before us an objective to become self-sufficient, and the only way that we'll become self-funded and viable long term is to have some of these programs advance and move typically into the pharmaceutical industry, into their pipelines. We would benefit through that activity, through the creation of companies. I think if we can establish partnerships that we're building now with additional pharmaceutical companies and with venture groups to help us co-create companies up in this region, most everything we do, we're not exclusively, but we're largely focused on New York State, on Western New York, on creating these avenues for opportunities and attracting that outside investment into the region. So I think 5 years from now, if we have a few venture groups working with us that like to think about co-investment and starting companies, they may start here. They may then become part of a portfolio or become acquired by a pharmaceutical company. That would be great. They may be a location in Rochester or in Buffalo of a bigger organization that's based in one of the pharma hubs. I think if we can further advance programs, and then whether Novo, whether Deerfield, whether another pharmaceutical partner decides to in-license a program for it, will sort of create the momentum for us to continue to advance. We have to think about that fundraising and investment activity in this area.
So Norma, let me turn to you as Ron's been talking about investment, and certainly I've heard that from the entire audience, and you and I, Norma, have had other conversations about the particular challenge in attracting capital, attracting investment dollars into a region like Buffalo Niagara. What are the challenges in that space? What are the opportunities? How can we continue the process of attracting investment capital into a region like Buffalo Niagara?
Well, I think one of the things that it's so important to have are some folks in town, whether they live here or they used to live here, but who have been successful in, again, there have been entrepreneurs, serial entrepreneurs, and they are familiar with what is going on here in the city. And if you think about 43 North, the business competition that's held here, so I sit on that board, and I can remember from in the very beginning, there were so many people who were like, this is never going to go anywhere. And if you think about it, we've had some wonderful successes through that. Now, life sciences has not been a main focus of 43 North because, again, it's life sciences take a longer path to come to fruition, but they still, have won. Circuit Clinical is a great example of a company that we funded through the CAT. They worked with our business development execs in the Center of Excellence, and we were able to, work with them through 43 North. They won that business competition. They've now got huge investment from LabCorp, and the company's on its way. And I think about it's really having, as Ron was mentioning, it's not just one contact point that's going to make a difference. It's really having a group of people that are thoughtful, that come from that venture world, but who have ties to Buffalo, or people like Jordan Levy who, just know folks out there in the world, and they become familiar with Buffalo. And 43 North has been one way of doing that, where, they had that competition every year. I think, Steve has connections through all the work he's done over the years. And if you think about the Jacobs Institute, again, different area, med device, but again, the folks that have, been involved with the Jacobs Institute similarly bring those connections with them. And they basically come here and of their own volunteering of their own time, work with our entrepreneurs to help them find that maybe not just the, as you're starting up a company, but again, like Circuit Clinical, how do you make that connection with a company like LabCorp, right? And it's all about the network and making people aware of who we are. And I think that's part of Buffalo. I think about it, we've done great things here, but we don't necessarily publicize those things. I mean, if you think about like Hauptman-Woodward, what a phenomenal institute. And, I still think of Herb Hauptman as I could walk over to the Hauptman-Woodward Institute, and if he was there, we could just sit down and we'd talk, have coffee. But that's what people are like. There's no air of, I'm too important to talk to you. Everybody in this town will take their time to sit down and say, talk to me about your idea. What are you doing? How are you going to get it to the next step? How can I help you? And I think that's whether it be, a company that you're dealing with, you find the right people, but it's the relationships that get you there. And people, I think, in Western New York, Rochester, Buffalo, and I'm sure the other cities across the state, we're all working towards trying to, again, enrich our communities with those networks. And the people that we have here now, if you think about it, Buffalo was kind of a dying city, and it's taken a long time for it to get to where it is now. But I have great hope for what it's going to be. And, people talk about the economy and this and that, all these things are going bad. I'm like, listen, we've lived through far worse things. And I truly do believe, I look at downtown when there was no one around, and I look at what's, on the medical campus right now, as, Ed had mentioned, and it just blows my mind. I mean, I said to someone, first of all, I remember embarking on the human genome, and everybody thought we were crazy. And now I can sequence a genome in a couple of days and analyze it. Who would have believed that? And all of that basically took thought leaders and people who, it wasn't about them. It was about achieving, again, the greater good, the greater goal for everyone. And I think all of the folks on this call, that's what we're all about. It's not just, it's not about the me. It's about how we all work together to achieve great things.
Boy, you've got me sold, Norma. But thank you too for mentioning the Jacobs Institute. We had hoped to have someone from Jacobs join us today, and unfortunately, at the last minute, that didn't work with timing and all. But it does make me think, and Eddie, I'll turn to you. Um, Organizations, kind of niche organizations like Hauptman-Woodward, like the Jacobs Institute, perhaps Roswell Park as well, fill a particular role in the larger community. Can you talk a bit about where does an institute like Hauptman-Woodward really fit into the larger system?
Well, we are a small, specialized institute, and I think Norma said it very very nicely when she, to paraphrase it, said the we rather than the me. I think what I see in Buffalo and what I see with all the people that we work with is we build collaborations based on our strengths. And what I see developing in the Western New York area is individual strengths that, when combined with the right communication between the leaders, they make us world beating. We can do the structural biology side, but we need people to come in with targets that they're interested in. We need the drug development to be at the end of where we go out. And that pipeline is available. It's here within Western New York. So that's what I think is tremendously exciting.
And in the few minutes that we have remaining in the program, I'm wondering if you could each give us kind of a quick snapshot for folks who are watching today, who are interested in connecting with your organization. How best do we start that? Stephen, for you, folks who are looking for opportunities to collaborate, where does that fit in?
Well, I guess it starts with an email, and I hope that you'll put up our email addresses. We get cold calls all the time. It then leads to a Zoom or a trip down the street. And once you realize what people are looking for, because we're so invested in making Buffalo better, and yet if you read the sign on Main Street, we want to keep Buffalo a secret part of us because we don't want to get ruined like other cities. But I think we're so invested in this sort of collaborative opportunity. If something comes my way, but it's in the neurovascular space, I'm on the phone to Nick Hopkins or Adnan Siddiqui or Mike Springer or Pam Marcucci, and vice versa. Some things come in through their door. I get an email right away. We've done some really big products and product projects and developmental projects because we're small enough to know everybody. I've been stunned. This is the smallest city over 1 million people because you can't go into a restaurant without running into somebody you know. It's a really very Buffalo thing. Almost always on the airplane, there's somebody you know. It's a very network city because people all want to see each other do better and do well. One of the most fun things I ever did was being a semifinals judge in 43 North. I met so many great people, learned so much more about the abilities, and that's just true for all of us. So it starts with an email, and that will probably start wheels in motion in so many directions.
And Ron, how about at the EDI? How can folks connect with you?
Yeah, I'd love to hear from folks that are interested in learning more or talking to us. We have a great website that not only summarizes sort of what we're about, it's discoveredi.org, but it also mentions some of the projects that we're working on and the relationship that we have with University of Buffalo, with Roswell Park, and with University of Rochester. So yeah, it'd be great to talk and, brainstorm, think about ideas together. That would really be terrific.
And Eddie, at Hauptman-Woodward, how best to connect?
Well, again, we have a website with a lot of the details there. It's hwi.buffalo.edu. And for those who are interested in getting a crystal, getacrystal.org is another website that people can go to. But we do a lot more than produce crystals. So.
And Norma, I'll give you the last word. On behalf of the University of Buffalo, where's the front door? How can folks best collaborate and connect with you?
So the Centers of Excellence sit underneath what's called Business and Entrepreneur Partnerships. And there's a website for that, which I can share with you, Wynn. And as well as the center has its own websites, and the core facilities have their own websites. But really, you can email me, and I can, be the ambassador to help people find their way through the university. It really has much been simplified compared to what it was a number of years ago. And that was really due in part to the work that was done by Christina Orsi when she came on.
Well, listen, folks, I'm afraid we're pushing up against our deadline. This has been a terrific conversation. Norma Nowak, Executive Director of the New York State Center of Excellence in Bioinformatics and Life Sciences at the University of Buffalo. Stephen Schwaitzberg, who directs the UB RISE program at the University of Buffalo. Ed Snell, President and CEO of Hauptman-Woodward Medical Research Institute. And Ron Newbold, Chief Business Officer at the Empire Discovery Institute. Thank you, one and all, for spending some time with us. This has been a terrific conversation. We will, as we try always to do, to share contact information with our audience, and I hope you will take the invitation from each of the speakers today and find an opportunity to connect and collaborate. Next up, for those of you wishing to learn more about some cutting-edge collaborations and innovations in the Buffalo-Niagara region, we will be following this segment with some interviews with really some terrific innovators. I encourage you to take a look at it. For now, we will talk to you later. Thanks, one and all.